Hey Max Leads. Today I'm going to show you how to do the reverse plank. This is a great exercise to do to work the muscles in the posterior chain, which include the upper back, the lower back, the glutes, and the hamstrings. So let's get to it. So to perform the reverse plank, place both hands onto the floor, keep a slight bend in your knees, drive with your heels into the floor, bringing your hip up, squeezing your glutes and your abdominals. You want to make sure you're bringing your hip up to the ceiling as high as possible while maintaining a straight body position. The first thing to look at is your hand placement. So some people do it with their fingers facing forward, but even more common, people tend to use it with their fingers facing backwards. But the best way for many people, especially if you have wrist issues, is to actually do it with your fingers facing outward. That's a little bit better on the wrist. It's a little bit easier to execute. Here are some common mistakes when dealing with the reverse plank. Number one, your hip is too low. In a situation like this, it means that the person is not squeezing their glutes or abdominals, so their hip starts to sink as a result of that. And when your hip sinks, you're not engaging your lower back and the abdominals in this position. So you really want to work on the posterior muscles here by getting that hip up as high as possible. Number two, your knees are locked, meaning your legs are completely straight. The problem with that is you're working the muscles in the posterior chain, which include the hamstrings. So you want to slightly bend your knees to make sure those hamstrings are activated. If you keep your legs locked in this position, you're essentially bending your knee backwards, which is just never a good thing. So always keep your knees slightly bent when you do this. Number three, your shoulders are going too far forward relative to your wrists. Now in this type of position, you are putting too much pressure on the shoulders. You really want to have your shoulders on top of the wrists so that you have a proper form of support. So if your shoulders are too far forward, it's just going to strain the shoulders too much. And number four, people tend to have their hands or their arms too wide when they're performing this. The problem with this situation is that if you don't have a very strong upper back, then you're putting a lot of strain on it. So it's very important to keep your wrists underneath your shoulders when you're performing this move. If done correctly, this is how the move should look when you're performing multiple reps.